Did buyers in the 1970s with 7.9 rates brag about their mortgages to early 80s buyers at 15.18? Or is this a new phenomenon in the internet age? It's still a mortgage at the end of the day. A debt obligation. This was back when you were buying a house to become a home. Not this 3 years stay flipping bullshit we are in now. Did they? Probably not. If you think it's appealing to everyone to brag about your interest rate, you're a weirdo and no one will want to be around you. Reddit didn't exist in the 70s. It comes off super weird when posters will out of nowhere gloat about their 2020-2021 interest rate. I'm happy for them. But I always assume they're losers who don't have much going on but a low interest rate. To mention it when nobody asked. It's small dick energy to brag about financing something at a low rate IMHO. Owning something outright is something to be proud of. Getting a low interest rate is a nothing burger. I don't think people talked about money politics or religion back then. It wasn't a big deal. Most people had seconds and thirds too. People lived in Middle American in the 70s and 80s. They generally don't anymore. Also, Texas population has doubled since the 80s. Man shrugging. I'd assume that any form of comparison and bragging has been exacerbated in the internet age. No, people didn't discuss finances, politics or religion in polite company back then. Nobody cared because shelter was $1,200 SF and had a median cost of $55K. Internet didn't exist back then, so conversations were limited to sports, jogging, jelly beans, and the TV show Dallas. Yeah, they used to call each other up on landlines and talk about it while they smoked butts at the kitchen table. No social media. None of this nonsense occurred. People kept their crap to themselves, and if you ran your mouth, someone put you in your place. There were not edgy millennials living on Reddit back then. They didn't have the internet. But there's no doubt many of them felt smug seeing rates below what a savings account would pay. Of course not lol. Interest rates don't fucking matter. It's the monthly payment. If it makes sense. And you can afford it. Bye. You can always refinance. Also don't bring up your interest rate in a convo. It's fucking weird. No. But society is falling apart faster than a space shuttle disintegrating on re-entry. And those lucky fucks will be eaten alive by the rest of us if they're too loud about it lol. I remember that douchecanoe next door. Doug. He kept placing fake classified ads bragging about his 7.25 rate. I never liked that guy. I brag about paying $9 on a car and not paying cash for it because if you can't afford to pay the bank, you can't afford the car anyways. For some reason 3ers view their massive liabilities as an asset. It's exponential for people doing BRRRR. We'll soon be testing risk tolerance on those liabilities assets compared to risk-free treasuries. I've seen some comments recommending jingle mail. We'll likely see initial stages of that before the end of this year. You mean buyers in 1999? Because I did. I did not brag. But having remembered the late 80s as a young person, 7.25 seemed just fine to me for my first home. But more importantly, homes were a lot cheaper in 1999. Bragging and envy were less of a thing back then. In those days both weren't looked upon favorably. My father had his house built in 1955 with a 20-year mortgage. With 20 years of inflation, the last few years of payments were chump change. It's not the interest rate that matters as much as the inflation rate. The mortgage interest rates in the early 1970s were similar to now. If you bought a house in 1971 with a 712 mortgage, you were laughing by the 1980s because inflation had doubled or tripled your salary. Also, recall that tax rates were much higher then and mortgage interest was tax deductible. If you're in the 40 bracket, writing off interest and property taxes was a big subsidy. No, they worked out a deal to assume the mortgage of those people. Who brags about the interest rate they get? That seems like a weird flex. I don't think people really cared about the interest rates on a $50K house. That would have been a very strange topic of conversation. In the 70s houses were $50,000. So compared to your wages it was still affordable. Did they have fixed interest rates back then? 2.25 sucks 7 ERS. I'm an FHA at 3.7 we. I don't know anyone who openly brags, but people respond when they are asked. Look up wraparound mortgage. Spoiler alert. Yes, interest rates matter. Yay, I'm sure they bragged about their mortgage rates on Reddit in the 70s. No more than those who were priced out wished existing buyers would hurry up and die. Social media brings out the worst in people. 3.0 checkbox with check. The funny thing to me is that my older boomer cousins a few years later were saying the same thing about their parents, mostly SG, that folks now say about boomers. Their parents also did not understand the horrible math of 18 and suggested that they were losers for not buying houses in 1979, 1982. Most had to wait a few years. I guess karma now that future generations that didn't know US economic history are saying the same thing to them. People from both eras could just save for a few more months at their McDonald's jobs and pay off their nice houses in nice neighborhoods that they had these rates on. And they were getting 12 savings account rates. Were house mortgages only 7 years? Was that in the 50s? I got a 8.25 rate in 1993 for my first house and I was damn stoked about how low it was. The house was $39,000. That was a lot of money on a $22,000 salary. I don't know what other people were paying, but this was considered a really good rate. Now the bank offered me a 7.5 rate, but it was a variable rate and I turned it down since rates were so low. It was likely that they would only rise from there. Brag? No, that's not me. Bragging is low-class behavior. Besides, the people who with higher rates were all busy refinancing to the new cheap rates of 8-ish. You need better friends if any of them brag about a mortgage rate. Honestly, did anyone even buy at those insane rates? No, because rates were falling so everyone could refinance lower. Your communication circle was a lot smaller before social media, so any bragging would be towards your family and friends. So likely not. It's easy to pump out a flex post on Reddit or Twitter. It's another to be with a group of friends and trash them all while boasting about yourself. You probably wouldn't be in the group anymore. Another weren't hyper obsessed with every aspect of home purchase transaction back then for the sake of being obsessed. They bought homes and started families and lived their lives. There was no rate comparison website. There was no Zillow or Redfin. You didn't even have a home computer. Everyone in real life is just grateful. Homes were still affordable even at those rates back then, maybe? I'm going to go against the grain here because I've heard my mom talk about almost this exact thing, disguised as her being smart and imparting a lesson to me. But I know her, and I bet my jacket that the story she told was undoubtedly accompanied by something which, if it wasn't bragging, was close. It was straight up bragging when she told me 10 years is a lot different than 18 months. I do recall people doing that.